folks. Welcome to the third and final review of the week. This time we have Paradox Soul. And mentioned, in the sign-off from the previous review, this is the Nintendo Switch version of Paradox Soul, which means our good friend Galax will be handling the body of this particular affair. So, with that in mind, Galax, take it away.
So, this game, I was relieved to see that on the Nintendo's website they're calling this a Metroidvania, because I kind of wasn't sure. It is an exploration-based survival platformer where you progress by getting things from certain areas and then have to backtrack. But for a Metroidvania, this game has very little in the way of upgrades. You get a gun that can actually lets you actually shoot enemies. This is a bit into the game that you actually get that. At least a couple of rooms in. You get a suit that lets you double jump and roll. You get bombs, and you get an ability to electrify the ground around you, which can destroy robots, which all of the main enemies are robots. There are only 50 quote-unquote rooms in this game, so it is very bite-sized, but each of those rooms can be fairly complicated in shape, and the map takes a little bit of getting used to. You have to figure out what means door and what means stairs that go up to the next floor or down a floor. Because it's little notches that do the things, and then blue squares with arrows next to them indicate doors to other areas. So yeah, you are in a test facility. You don't really know why, and you have to go to the test area. There are like 3 test areas. The first couple have power-ups for you. The first one has, I think, bombs. The second one has the electric power-up, which, in addition to exploding robots, can also power some devices that are unpowered. And then after that, most of the progression is finding there are some key cards before then in rooms marked as cloak rooms. But after that, a lot of the progression is getting to lock terminals, blowing up the locks, and then going through the area that the thing that it shows that it unlocked, and then getting to the final test area where you beat the final boss and get a kind of ending, but it dumps you right back into the game normally. Because the secret is that there are 2 keys that are hidden behind bombable walls in the facility, and there are only like 3 or 4 bombable walls in the whole facility. The other 2 that don't have keys behind them have shortcuts to a deeper floor. And I only know where one of those is, and I only found it because a guide on Steam mentioned it. The other one, I found what is clearly the same kind of exit, but is not... I couldn't find the way to get into it. So yeah, you have to really read the map. There are not many kinds of enemies here, but each one requires a different approach. There are like zombie robots that just kind of shamble towards you that even at the beginning of the game you can generally keep up with shooting if you walk away from them and fire back at them. There are dogs that you can jump over, but they're very fast and really a pain in the ass, and I think I died more to dogs than anything else. There are some faster robots. There are boxes on the walls that disgorge security drones. There are robots that use like forklifts. And then there are like, at the very end of the game, there are like ED-109s or whatever the fuck they're called from RoboCop. They're 2-legged walkers that I think the only way you can destroy those is to drop a bomb and have them walk into it. But if you don't time it right, they will kick that bomb. And you are vulnerable to your own bomb explosions. So yeah, be careful. The bosses were actually fairly challenging because This game does not convey a whole ton, but once you figure out what you're doing, they're not super easy to execute. Like, you have to, like, learn to read when they're going to attack and how to get to the area that they're not going to attack. And the final boss, I actually took a couple of tries to realize the way to actually make it vulnerable. Because the final boss uses a force field that is very similar to the one that in a few places you can pick up as a temporary power up, but the boss's one doesn't stop working after like 1 or 2 hits. So a lot of the difficulty in this game, I think, comes from the fact that you have 2 hits, unless you have the force field, and then once the force field goes away, you have 2 hits. And when you die, you just get sent back to the entrance to the room you were in, which some of these rooms are long enough that, like, that's an issue because there are multiple sets of enemies in between you and the end. But so it's forgiving in that way, but there are some areas that it can be hard to get back out of unless you really learn the patterns. There are robots that shoot at you, and it's not immediately obvious necessarily. You have to basically roll into cover near them until you get the electric power up, and then if you're behind them, you can kill them from behind with that. Which is good because otherwise sometimes there's not cover on both sides, and then you're in trouble. So yeah, it's a really simple game, I feel like, but it's pretty well constructed, and you actually get a pretty decent, as far as a Metroidvania goes, this is like a light version of the Metroid side of that, where you're kind of trapped pretty much alone in a mysterious facility, and it's not a comfortable feeling. And the bad ending and the true ending, or the good ending that I got after the bad ending by getting the keys and getting out, I don't know if you get a better ending if you get the keys and go out without actually fighting the last boss. You might. But I'm not going to start the whole game over to do that. They're kind of unsettling a little bit. Like, they're not like, oh, happy you got out. There's stuff, I don't know. It's just like a couple images, but you get the idea from that. I don't know, you guys have any questions?
Not really. Seems like a straightforward enough game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, tiny to boot.
Yeah, it is a bite-sized game. It only took me like a few hours to actually complete it, and that's with some frustration. Although I will concede that had I not looked up to see if there were any guides for it, it probably would have taken me a lot longer to find those hidden keys. Although once I found the first bombable wall, I knew what to look for in bombable walls, so the other one was less difficult to find. So yeah, I would. What is this like? For $5, I think this is worth it on Steam. On Switch, it's also $5. So yeah, I would give this a check out if you enjoy this genre of game at all. It's probably doesn't have a ton of replay value, and it's pretty small, but it's enjoyable while you're playing it.
It's good to hear. And yeah, I guess that's about it for the Fragments Silicon review session for the week. Coming up on the week ahead, let me see. Coming up on Wednesday, August 7th, we have John Pickett of Manga Gamer returning. This time around, we're probably going to be talking about the latest Higurashi release. I forget which one just hit Steam because, honestly, I'm not keeping all that much track of what they're doing with Higurashi. You know, we haven't actually covered any of the Higurashi games, and probably not.
Higurashi is possibly. I mean, if I had played any of them, I would be more likely to say that we should do a topic of discussion on it at some point, because Higurashi is weird.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, I saw like the first season of anime, but that's not that's just a little sliver of what Higurashi is. Even in anime,
Yeah,
there.
well,
Yeah.
part of the problem is that Higurashi it's one of those visual novels where it doesn't have roots. Instead, it has like what 12, 14, some large number of visual novels that start out the same, but each one develops through the scenario differently
Right.
for the early
And
stuff.
they're called like arcs, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, yeah, we'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about what they announced at Otakon recently. And let me see. On Friday, August 9th, we'll be talking to Robert Waller of Waller Digital. We'll be covering the puzzle game Sinker 2. I think that's how that's pronounced. It's spelled kind of weird. It's like sink. There's no E in the sinker.
I think the standard internet language pronunciation of something that ends with just stop and then R is that it's pronounced as if it was ER.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Tumblr, Flickr.
Yeah. I mean, it's a game of hooks. Like quite literally, the entire casino is like you have these hook dimensions. You pull things to and fro. It's like I remember spending a bit of time with the previous game. I haven't found the time to play any of Sinker 2, so hopefully get to do that this week. Anyway, so that's a Friday show. That's Friday morning.
Man.
So
okay.
Regular time, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to grumble about your sleep schedule getting interrupted this week.
Good.
And yeah, so until Wednesday, I shall wish you good gaming.